Next up, we have Matthew Littlehale, who's a full-time software engineer in the marketing space with 20 years of experience. He also coordinates community groups with his church, occasionally preaches, and was featured on a panel of the impacts of technology in society. He's been a guest lecturer on Genesis as ancient literature, so that'd be cool to talk to you about. And you're going to give us a paper on opposing society or technological society with community, which is going to look at some scripture and looking at the cultural systems of the time of the New Testament, which I think will be a fascinating paper. So let's welcome Matthew up here.
Since putting that kind of abstract together, some of the scripture theology part is implied in a lot of this. I went from like 8,000 words down to what I could fit in here. So, and yeah, since that time also, I'm now director of a dinner church, which is a localized thing. So I've gone from community group coordinator to dinner church runner, which primarily serves homeless and low-income folks in our area. But the combination of my experience as a software engineer, my experience coordinating community in our church, and then going out and forming community with this dinner church, I think informs a lot of this. And I think while we talk about Ellul not giving any kind of guidance or prescription for what we should do here, I think what I'll get to is there's not a prescription and there's not guidance. And I think that's intentional that he doesn't provide us anything there, because the response needs to be in our situation, in our communities where we find ourselves in a specific time and place. The software engineering aspect of this comes together where I've written some of this tracking software. I've tracked people through like their click journey to purchasing things and marketed to people, understand how it all works. In early days of Facebook, where you could get a lot of people's information through them just liking your website. You would get their details, and then you would get the details of all their connections and friends. That's since changed because of some of the privacy concerns that have came out of that. But in the early days, it was a free-for-all, and you could do whatever you wanted. And now it's just more subtle, and behind the scenes, we can still see everything you're doing and track everything you're doing and spit it back to you. And all that comes together in what I think is the solution is community. I think community is a defining part of our human nature. In our core, we innately crave community. Relationships among people is how we get well-being, connectedness. It's one of our primary ways of dealing with the human condition that we find ourselves in, how we survive and how we've survived throughout history. Who we are is influenced by our community or lack of community that we experience throughout all the different phases of our lives. Our language, our speech patterns, our desires, inspiration, purpose, all these things. The pieces that make us who we are defined by the communities that we are a part of. It's where we find our humanity and where we can find humanity in others. And talk about the ideal community for a second here. A community being a group of individual people who are associated and interacting with one another because of location, common interest, common purpose, common history, common experience, or just relationship. Community not being static as one specific thing. It changes over time, where the individuals that make up a community contribute to its development or detriment, influencing the experience of the community for the whole set of individuals, and inversely, the community affecting the individual and their development positively or negatively according to the influence of all its members. The individual in the community benefits from the social construction of the community, and the character of the community is informed and influenced by the individuals within it. And the individual will belong to multiple communities throughout their life, even at certain points that will overlap, and each of these communities that influence them in one way will carry over to the influence the other community that they are a part of at any particular point in time. This individual is defined by their historical and current community involvement and goes between the different communities that they're involved in. I think there's a couple aspects of an ideal community, which is purpose or mission, diversity, and localization. There's other aspects too, I think. I think these are three primary ways to talk about it. The purpose or mission of a community doesn't necessarily need to be philanthropic for it to be ideal. The ideal community's purpose is one in which there's a benefit or a good outside of the community. And this is, again, talking ideal community, not how communities always experienced. And this purpose derives meaning from the contribution of the individuals towards that purpose, supporting other members of the community and being supported by the community as a whole towards that purpose. This purpose can't be to scale or grow or come up with some kind of definition for other communities to follow. The purpose is centered on the mutual care of the individuals within the community for the benefit of those outside of the community. Diversity, quickly, is what allows the purpose and contribution towards that purpose to avoid homogenization by introducing new perspectives into it. And I'll talk about that a bit more, but if we get too homogenized in what our community is, we become insular. And it's difficult where we are, and we can see this, as Ellul talks about, like no power and what we can do there. Localization is a challenge now as we've been globalized through the use of social media and the internet. And there's a lot of benefits for the purpose, like how we're all here together. We've used technology to do Zoom meetings leading up to it. We've been able to email and communicate, update on the website, and there's a lot of good benefits, but there's a enforcing factor of localization based off of the population of a location. But depending on your localization, your locality, diversity, especially economically or ethnicity, becomes difficult. That may be where you want to consider moving to experience some no power, to get some more diversity into your community. The ideal community is where I believe we can find the opportunities for resistance against technique. But I think first we need to explore what technique's influence has been on community and how community has been co-opted by technique. Ellul says traditional societies were centered on human needs and instincts, for example, in the family, clan, or seigneury. Modern societies, on the other hand, are centered on technical necessity and derivatively, of course, on human adherence. Man in modern societies is not situated in relation to other men, but in relation to technique. For this reason, the sociological structure of these societies, communities, is completely altered. There's no longer any question of autonomous collectivities or groups with specific values or orientations. Modern collectivities and groups have no existence beyond technique. They are representative of the major tendency of our time. Our sense of community has been adapted to and co-opted by technique, and we're unsure and unable to act or respond outside of technique to this. Our relationships have become efficiencies in support of technique. Our communities are simulations and imitations. Technique has co-opted communities through restricting our time, disabling our ability to communicate effectively between individuals, and preventing us from knowing one another. Technique's requirement on us between work and consumption and distraction have continued to increase. Our time is managed by our work and our production, our media schedule, our children's essential activities, all the things that we have to do that technique requires of us. Our time is measured to precise minutes and scheduled for us outside of our control. And with that, we conflate distraction and consumption with relaxation and connection. Our work is mindless drudgery. Our work is aimless, useless, callous business tied to a clock, an absurdity profoundly felt and resented by the worker whose labor no longer has anything in common with what was traditionally called work. That's a lull. We become numb and we're tired, and we leave work unfulfilled without energy or purpose. But our media provides the distraction that we yearn for and gives us the direction which technique requires. Through our media, in the remaining unscheduled moments that we might have, we consume imitations of human relationships through scripted programming. We witness an orchestrated entertainment version of community, and through consuming this, we feel as though we have experienced the genuine human interaction we desire, but in reality, we've experienced nothing. And when we do participate in community, our community is influenced by that media that the individuals have consumed. Our interactions become mundane imitations of the simulated and stimulating interactions we've witnessed in our media. Community becomes centered on what we consume and what's marketed toward us. Technique forms a feedback loop of this data that reinforces our preferences and targets us for further consumption that more aptly fits the needs that it has defined for us, based off the technique's data-driven definition of who we are. Just as a side note, one of the areas that's been lost in this is this concept of the third place. Third places are the places where it's not home or work, it's where people have opportunities for community. But similarly, for all the reasons just stated, the third places have become imitations of what they should be. We don't have places to go, meet other people organically, and be together. You can read Bowling Alone. That's a good talk through all the third place ideas. Secondly, technology has made the automation and integration of technique more complete. When Ellul, and this is coming from me as a software developer, when Ellul was writing Technological Society, technique and technology had this separation that I don't think exists in a tangible way any longer. Technology as a subset of technique has grown to envelop everything. Every company now is a technology company following the mantra, anything worth doing is worth measuring. We can see this in what you said as software gets released, it's a failure, it has all these bugs, you can iteratively work on it. The way that software is built is through systems of like, how do we improve this process to produce more software more quickly? Let's ignore the bugs that come out and we'll fix them later, and iteratively on and on and on. It is, software itself is a good visual of technique. But the impact on community is that companies and purveyors of propaganda and they advertise utilizing their understanding of, they're utilizing their understanding of the human desire that we have for community and the power that it can have over us as an individual. Technique is aware of our innate need for human connection as it appears in community, and similarly to how we consume imitated community through our traditional media, gives us the appearance of human connection through social media. That is, we try to experience a simulation of connection and community through our social networks, digital social networks. Through our technology, our interactions are curated for us through finely tuned algorithms built off of ever-improving data collection tools that are used to quantify a company's definition of who we are. We as individuals become data sets which are used to cohort us into common data attributes and assign us to specific groups of people with whom they determined are based off of personas that are more likely to be influenced to take an action that the company is desirous to take. The more we interact, the more we are able to be quantified, and the more our data set can be made complete. This data set and cohorts of attributes are used to provide more focused propaganda by advertisers and for the companies or by the state. And as every company has become a technology company, in turn, every company has now become a data collection company in order that an individual will engage with that company to buy their stuff. As our data set is quantified and we're cohorted into these defined communities, our groups become targets for propaganda. The problem with these cohorts is that we also succumb to that definition that's been provided for us. The algorithm and the data utilizing our basic human desire for community is successful, very successful. You can make a lot of money with this. Within our cohort, we find similarly minded people who are influenced by the same types of content. We become an echo chamber amplifying similar messages back and forth. And we fear that we might be excluded, so we participate more and more. We fear that we're going to miss out. We fear that our community will be infiltrated by outsiders who will change what we have become accustomed to. Our us versus them mentality is used against us in a mindset of scarcity and security and survival that considers the outsider of our community as an enemy. And again, we end up reusing the same methodology as the algorithm, creating a cohorts of people in our heads based off of who they are associated with, and assume that their data sets is the same as what the machine has given them, and we judge them accordingly. Ellul says the human being tells himself he can only attain paradise through the destruction of his enemies. And we no longer have the ability to know others outside of this bubble, where they are just opposing data sets. And even within our bubble, we assume that these people within our bubble are the same data set that we are, that they have the same beliefs and experience and understanding that we have. And that prevents us from actually knowing the nuance of who this person is beyond their data set definition. I think we've all seen this plainly in our political discourse over the past decade. Social media's influence and enabling of this should be clear. But it's clear. We're integrated. It's hard to get out. And I think our humanity is at stake here. It has been. It's been exacerbated and accelerated. Our relationships and our neighborhoods, our social clubs, our religious groups, they all fall prey to technique's impacts. However, I think that our human desire for community that's been co-opted by technique may also be the opportunity for us to resist. The ideal community, I think, offers us a path, at least. As technique pervades our politics and economy and infiltrates our humanity, we become isolated into these bubbles, but we don't have actual communication between individuals. Our echo chambers are just resonance of the same message, repeated, getting louder and louder. And anyone outside of our homogenized technical community becomes part of the other, who we are only able to identify based off of the technical community that they are a part of. We lose the ability to see an other as anything else, and in doing so, we don't even try to communicate because they are the enemy, and we're afraid. In order to be a community that can resist, the community must work towards the ideal community with purpose and diversity and localization. Within these, we can work towards understanding the other apart from the technical community they may belong to. And understanding begins with communication. Localization enforces some of this through common shared ownership of a vicinity within which the community exists. There's a shared experience and history, and that all exists within the neighborhood that's localized. And with that, we can start to begin having healthy communication with others who have that shared experience. And this leads the community to being welcoming so that the diversity of the location can be introduced. This diversity within a community provides the perspectives that the community needs and may not have considered. And we have to listen to the others that come in. This is how we communicate. We can't just be talking. We have to listen. And it's difficult, but we need to do that. In the ideal community, the purpose of the community should benefit those outside of the community. Like I said, the individuals within this community should seek to encourage one another in healthy communication that seeks to understand the other inside and outside the community, welcoming individuals into the community, or even welcoming entirely separate communities into communication with one another. In seeking healthy communication outside of the confines of the technical community, we gain the opportunity to know another and be known ourselves. This, along with community, is innate to our humanity. Deep within us, we want to be more fully known and to more fully know another. Technique and propaganda will attempt and succeed in defining for us who we are and who the other is without the need for our own understanding. Communication and understanding are inefficient uses of our time. To be known by another requires humility and vulnerability, which in itself resists techniques pull towards the power of methodological success. Knowing another allows us to understand an individual beyond the data set that defines them. A person's story, like how they tell their story, the way they move their hands, their micro expressions, all these pieces that we see when we're together and localized come together to make a fuller picture of who they are. And community allows us to experience that together in practice. And in fact, like an individual's story will be understood differently between the individuals within that community, so that that community as a whole has a fuller understanding of who that person is. You may hear a different story differently. You may see a micro-expression differently. And that coming together of the community is how we are more fully known by others. The community of individuals based on their own individual histories come together and know one another greater than any single individual could and greater than any data set can define. A community that's working towards knowing and being known by one another will also be attractive. The ideal community can't be insular, succumbing to the fear of the other outside of the community. It needs to welcome and seek to know the other as they become a part of the community. The ideal community as a whole should seek to know and be known with other communities outside of itself. In doing this, the resonance dampens and we're able to take a step outside of technique, even for a moment, catch a glimpse, and be free of our algorithmic data set defined caricature of humanity and ourselves. Knowing and being known at the individual or community level, it just takes time. It takes time, and we have to get outside of our loop of time that technique requires of us. Technique seeks to direct our time towards more efficient goals, but healthy conversation that leads to being known takes time. And in an ideal community, beyond being known by one another, there's a care that's entrusted between the individuals. Community takes intentional and flexible time that our technical society does not afford us through what it requires of us. Our technical media is tailored towards our engagement in order that it might become more efficient. Knowing and caring for another takes our attention away from that engagement. Technique makes intentionality and flexibility inconvenient at best and unaffordable, if not impossible, for most. Many would not be able to survive in our society financially and otherwise if we were to take time away from our day in order to spend it with another. Beyond being known and doing good and care for the individuals within and outside of the community is it's just inefficient and it's unproductive. Technique will assure us that it itself is good and it will take care of the other, and we will trust its promises. Technique and propaganda will use our fear for survival to prevent us from providing for another so that they could afford the intentional and flexible time that they need. Knowing and being known, doing good, providing care will seem counterintuitive in how technique has shaped us to feel about how we use our time. Technique requires our time and attention, but the ideal community will as well. The ideal community, being inefficient and unproductive, is what community asks of us. But within this community, we can find and reclaim our humanity. The ideal community, by its nature, through purpose, diversity, and localization, will resist technique and provide a way for us to rethink the whole situation of man. That's all. Community is how we can step outside the confines of what is sufficient, step outside of how we've been integrated, and at the very least, just catch a glimpse of how firm technique's hold is on us. Listen, our humanity is at stake. The very nature of who we are is realized in the relationships that we have with others, and we find that within community. Technique has succeeded in replacing our community with relationships that are technical reproduction. While this has been in progress for decades, the past few years have seen this culmination of technologies entrenching technique's integration over us. Considering what's coming next, what's even out now, considering generative AI, augmented reality, and advances in quantum computing that will enable this, we can see the inevitability of Ellul's technical vision, the culmination of what is happening here. And to follow with the same quote Davin gave, our deepest instincts and our most secret passions will be analyzed, published, and exploited. We shall be rewarded with everything our hearts ever desired, and the supreme luxury of the society of the technical necessity will be to grant bonus of useless revolt and of an acquiescent smile. These technologies and what will be iteratively built through them, they are our postmodern Babel, in which we, thinking we are in control, come to complete integration into this mass man, defined by a data model and algorithm that might improve the methods in which technique work towards its next level of integration. And we don't know what that looks like yet, but it will continue integrating and iterating. We will have the sense that we are building a tower, a temple to ourselves in competition with the gods, but it will be technique that we bow down to. Technique will continue to co-opt our basic human needs. And escaping this integration seems impossible. However, I think the ideal community provides a way for us to resist. And when we begin to engage with the other, when we are known and know another, when we do this within this ideal community built on purpose and diversity and locality, we loosen technique's grasp on our humanity. This is because there's no actual way to systematize our relationships. There's no way to systematize community. There's no way of co-opting knowing and being known, and there's no metric to measure success in the care of one another. And in this glimpse of resistance, I believe, and this will be my theology coming through here, I believe in this glimpse of resistance, we catch a glimpse of what the kingdom of God looks like here on earth. When we have this real, actual community with one another, we are bringing people together into what God has called us to be. When we're going and knowing the other as the other, we're doing what Jesus has done for us. When we eat together, when we are together, we are who God made us to be, and we can see God's kingdom, and God's kingdom is inherently resistant to technique. Just to finish, each of us in his own life must seek ways of resisting and transcending technological determinants. Each man must take this effort in every area of his life, in his profession, in his social and religious and family relationships. I think this is what Ellul is asking us to do. This is Ellul's prescription for us, if we're looking for one, to go and make the effort to go and build community and be together, help people catch a glimpse of technique's hold and catch a glimpse of God's kingdom here in this world. Community is one of these ways that we can resist and transcend. So let's have a little hope. Thanks.
Thanks, Matthew. That was